Employees of IKEA, what are some of the worst family meltdowns you have seen? This was my IKEA family meltdown. My then boyfriend and I were getting our own place just after college. Until then, we had both been using twin beds thanks to student living spaces, and sharing a single twin was proving uncomfortable for two adult humans subjected to California summer temperatures. To fix this issue, off to IKEA. We went. Things start off okay. We start with lunch and admire the living room couches, move into kitchenwares, all so far enjoyable fantasy. And then we reach our destination bedrooms. A sea of beds and a variety of price points greet us with brightly colored duvet. An experienced furniture purchaser, I'd start scanning the price tags to narrow the options. I bring him to an attractive, affordable model I think matches some of our bookcases. And this is where the trouble starts. See, up until now, I didn't realize exactly how bad this man's fear of decision-making was. He stares at the bed incomprehensibly for literal minutes, refusing to talk about it. Eventually, it is discovered that buying a bed means committing to delaying graduate school, never moving to the East Coast, and having children with me. I don't understand that logic and request explanation, which is slowly and tearfully given. We spent 3 hours in that IKEA and left with nothing. About a month later, we went back and again after several hours bought that exact bed. He never went to grad school or moved to the East Coast. We also did not have children and broke up a few years later. He took the bed. Story 2. I was in the Vancouver IKEA, and they have a children's play area that was packed. There must have been 100 kids in there, some being watched from outside, and some completely unattended. Without warning, the power went out. There were emergency lights, but the play area was still quite dark. The kids all started shrieking and crying and running around in the darkness. The power probably only out for 2 minutes, but the chaos was spectacular. When the lights came back on, it looked like a battleground. Some kids were bruised and bloodied. Some had the 1,000-yard stare of a war veteran. There were a few who had bonded together in the tunnels and refused to leave. Some were missing entirely. They must have escaped in the shadows into the well-furnished maze that is IKEA. The meatballs were good too, overall 10 out of 10, but the bar was set high and no future visits could compare to that eventful day. Story 3. I was working in the kitchen accessories department, and this middle-aged guy asked me where the cheap white plates are. So these are the lowest price plates that come in one color and are sold straight off the pallet, but they changed the color from white to light beige a month ago. I explained this, and this guy starts raising his voice at me, telling me he owns a restaurant, and that I go back there and bring him more white plates. At this point, I know I'm not dealing with a rational person here, but I go to the computer and check if there isn't in fact a pallet of the stuff, just so he sees I've tried helping him. Even shown him the big fat 0 on the screen. He gets red in the face and starts telling me how I'm personally responsible for the gas he spent driving here on his Audi A8. Asked me if I know how much gas an Audi A8 burns. He's yelling now. The whole floor is looking our way, and I'm doing my best to not laugh, but I realized I'm already smiling, and that pissed him off even more. The convo went something like this: "You're going to pay for the gas I spent driving here." I doubt that, sir. Listen here, kid, I'm going to drive back home, load up all the white plates into my car, and dump them all in front of your store, and you're going to pay me every last cent for the damages. That's a good idea. I wasn't even trying to be rude. I just really wanted this guy to do this. But then he asked for my manager, yelled at him, basically repeating everything, including his Audi A8 gas mileage, everything. He ended up buying the light beige plates. The second one was when I was on my 3rd day working at IKEA, still wearing the New Here badge. And this lady asks me, where do we keep the plates for slugs, escargot plates? It was my 3rd day, but I already knew we don't carry that, and said I don't even think I saw one before in my life. She goes, if I was your boss, I'd fire you on the spot, and stomps away. What did I do, lady? Story 4. I work in IKEA food. I had one guy claim that he was a big guy and wanted me to put extra food on his plate. After I made the plate, I explained that I can't, as we have to stick to a portion size, and that he could add a side plate for $1.99. He then yelled that we are all cheapskates, stormed off to his family, brought all the plates of food that we made for them, and told us that he is going to bring his family somewhere good. Story 5. I'm a cashier. There was a bratty teenager and her mom about to pay for their transaction, and the mom suddenly said, "You know what, this girl here doesn't deserve any of this. Put it all back." I've never seen a teenager completely lose it. Until that shift, I feel bad for my coworker who had to do my gobbacks. Story 6. I was once shopping at IKEA and noticed a couple with a guy just having the complete look of apathy and distraction. While being berated by his wife, the volume was fairly low until they got to the bedroom department, and she specifically said, "I'm thinking of buying new sheets, but might as well not, cause I don't want to buy sheets, just so you can that HR in them. I hope you realize I'm just staying with your cheating ass until the kids are grown up." I was so distraught, I went for cut burr to calm myself. Story 7. Currently in IKEA making the most of my complimentary cups of tea, the couple at the next table over just had a brilliant argument about whether or not they could put a TV in their bathroom. He thinks it will fit white girlfriend, thinks it's the stupidest idea ever they don't need it won't fit. And if he wants to do that, then he can move back in with his mother. And he keeps asking her to give him half of her Dane cake. After about 5 minutes of whining, she told him if wanted some he should have bought one, because apparently he always does this. I might follow them around the rest of the shop to see what else happens. Update: couple didn't kill me for stalking them. I just ran out of battery. I followed them for a while before I found it way too awkward. The caffeine from 4 complimentary cups of tea kicked in, and I needed to get out of there. I left them in soft furnishing textiles. He was playfully throwing pillows at her to get her attention. She turned around and said scarily calmly, "I know that you think you're being funny, but you're not, so if you're going to act like a child, I will treat you like a child. Start behaving like an adult, or we'll leave now, and I'll take away your Xbox for a week." He pouted and marched off, muttering under his breath, "IKEA Bristol lady, if you're out there, I hope he grows up. And also, I really like the peacock blue pillow you bought." Also, to answer the many questions about free tea, I live in the UK, and if you're an IKEA card holder, you get free tea and coffee Monday to Friday. Updates on updates. Dudes, I get it, some of you find it funny to throw pillows at your SOS. But ask yourself, one, did they find it funny too? And two, did they repeatedly ask you to stop? Story 8. A guy came in and wanted something that we only had in the air, so it would require a forklift to get the product down, which we don't do with people in the store. For fairly obvious safety reasons, I told him we could get it down right after the store closed for him. But that was not an acceptable answer. He proceeded to lose his on me, demanding I bring out a forklift and take it down now, as this is happening. His wife and 2 small children walk up. I say, "Well, sir, just imagine that your children are in the aisle when the forklift comes out and an accident occurs. Your children could be crushed by a falling pallet, the arms of the lift, or any other number of possibly fatal incidents." His response, "I don't give a about that, I just want you to get my table." I didn't have to continue the conversation. His wife took care of it. Story 9. Seen a dude in the car park of the Newcastle IKEA cram a fuckload of furniture into his Ford Focus. Wife stood next to him screaming at how much of an idiot he is for buying so much, how they aren't going to fit in the car now, and how he is putting all this furniture together alone because it's his. Stupid, we don't need. Husband replies, "No, you won't fit in the car now," and drives off. Story 10. My BF and I overheard while browsing at IKEA a couple having some sort of miscommunication in their relationship. I guess they were deciding on things to buy. The girl says we should get that rug, in which the guy replies to her super loud, "There is no way, you don't live with me." I didn't catch the rest of it, as we had to walk away, so they wouldn't hear us laughing so hard. Story 11. Not a meltdown, but one of my favorite stories to tell people. My now husband and I were driving to IKEA about 3 hours away, and this was at a point in dating when we were starting to get serious on the trip. I found out his middle name was Riley, and he mentioned how it could make a very cute girl name. He was completely aghast and was very firm in stating that Riley is a boy's name and had been handed down in his family for over 5 generations. I tried telling him that it was starting to change over to be a girl's name, now much like Ashley or Quinn. He thought I was crazy and was adamant that people do not name little girls Riley. We lightheartedly argued the point for a good 15 minutes. We finally get to IKEA Park and walk in the front door. 5 feet in front of us, a little girl of about 2 goes running by, and her mother is chasing after her saying, "Riley, get back here." My husband just looked at me defeated and said, "Shut up." Our firstborn girl was named Riley. We carried on the family tradition, just in a slightly different way. Story 12. We needed a new mattress. My now wife insisted that we pay the $19 in for delivery. I was adamant that I could get it home on the roof rack. I strapped the mattress to the roof of the car, ratchet straps across all 4 corners, wasn't going anywhere. We get in the car and opt to take surface streets home instead of taking the highway. Everything's going great. But there is one stretch where the speed limit is 50. We're driving along and a big truck flies by, and immediately after it passes us, I see the mattress fly off the car in the rear view mirror. Holy, I'm backing up on the road and come to the mattress. I did do a fantastic job strapping it to the roof rack. Problem is that the mattress took the roof rack with it. It's still tied to the mattress. We hoist it back on the roof and take it slow to a gas station, restrap the mattress straps, going through the car this time, and get it home. There's a small cut on the underside of the mattress and some gravel in the protective plastic cover. Otherwise, no real harm done. My wife still brings it up every time we go to IKEA, so we're paying for delivery, right? Story 13. I used to work in IKEA in my student days. The Glasgow, Scotland store When it was newly opened, an elderly Irish guy and his wife stopped me and asked where IKEA was. I explained that they work in IKEA and they couldn't understand they had arrived at the ferry port in Ireland that morning and decided that they'd go on a day trip to somewhere they hadn't been before. When they arrived at the port in Scotland, there was a dedicated IKEA bus. They thought IKEA was an actual place in Scotland and didn't realize it was a shop. I walked away, trying not to piss myself laughing as I could hear them blaming each other for the mistake. Story 14. I work at a massive IKEA store in Australia. For a lot of people, it's their first time in IKEA, so by the time they get to my section, they start to panic. Because they aren't used to the mosaic layout, there are a lot of breakdowns, usually small children, who want to go home. Seriously, there's so many parents wandering around with their 5-year-olds at 9 p.m. on a school night. Go home anyway. The most memorable breakdown I dealt with was when I was working in home organization. This man marched up to me, phone in hand and family in tow. He wants to buy a certain clothes rack, but he can't find it anywhere in this stupid store. All right, mate, I'm happy to help you out. Although I'm not liking the attitude, he shows me a picture on his phone, a screenshot from a website with no context. I haven't seen the clothes rack before either. It's very new, very old, or not something that we stock. I ask if he knows the name of it. No, that's your job. He's getting even more worked up now. But I can't search with just an image. I check our store's website, and I can't find the damn clothes rack anywhere. I asked if he was sure. He looked at store location, his website specifically. Not all IKEA stock the same stuff. Shocking. I know immediately. I can tell he feels insulted. Of course, he looked at the right website. I activate dumb sales role mode and ask him to show me. He pulls up the website, and there is the clothes rack quite clearly on target.com. He notices and storms off wordlessly. I got immense pleasure watching him get lost and do a couple of loops through the store before finding the exit. Story 15. I used to work at IKEA. I have so many stories from there. I think a memorable one was the family fighting, but it was 2 women fighting over my service. I was helping one customer, and it was a super busy weekend, so I'm sure all the employees were pretty busy. As I was helping her, another woman came up and interrupted us. They started arguing, and one of them called the other woman a cow. Story 16. 2 words: Black Friday. It was 9:55. We opened at 10 o'clock. We were almost done. All that we had left to do was put out some children's kitchen set. What we didn't realize was that it was 50% off. I only had 2 pallets left to put out when the store opens and the horde came. They were crazy, sprinting, pushing, and shoving. They fought to get to these kitchens. And when they noticed my pallets, they tore them open and took it. Eventually, one woman started screaming and attacked the guy who took the last one off of the pallet, not noticing that the 2 full pallets. I had to pull her off him, and security came after. About 10 minutes, the chaos ended, and I cleaned up. At the point, an elderly couple came and asked if there were any kitchens left, and I put one in their cart. As my co-workers laughed at what had just occurred. Story 17. I worked at IKEA for 5 years selling sofas. One of my co-workers, let's call him Jim, worked evenings and weekends and returns, while his day job was teaching math at a local high school. One day, a woman comes to the counter trying to return some pillows. Generally speaking, they didn't take returns on pillows for sanitary reasons. She also didn't have a receipt, and the pillows were clearly used and absolutely disgusting. Jim tells the customer that he's sorry, but our return policy states we only accept products within 30 days of purchase with the receipt and unused in the original packaging. This did not sit well with her, and she began to scream at Jim. She was spiteful and cruel. Jim had come to the US from another country years ago, and while he spoke perfect English, still had an accent. She mocked his accent and told him to speak English. She repeatedly shouted that he was stupid and would never amount to anything. He was too dumb to get a real job. Meanwhile, her teenage son is in the background. He's pleading with his mother to stop shouting at Jim. He's begging her to give it up so they can go home. Eventually, she turns around to shout at her son and ask him why he cares so much. That's my calculus teacher. There had already been a parent-teacher night scheduled for a few weeks later. His father went alone. Story 18. I did a stint doing early morning, 5 a.m. start replenishment at IKEA. One summer, I was still knocking a bin in the warehouse at opening time, so I had a view of the dude going over to open the gate at the front of the store to release the hordes right at 9, or who the time comes. He flips the switch, the gate starts rising, and as soon as it's high enough, this woman ducks under it and begins all but running across the store. That's when I realize her kids, who looked like they were about 3 to 5, frantically chasing her flat out just to try and keep up, made me kind of sad. Story 19. Last time I was in IKEA, I watched a Middle Eastern family have an argument in the couch section. Family walked away to go sit in one of the demo living rooms. Dude proceeded to pick up a futon-like couch, walk over, and chuck it at them. He proceeded to scream in what I assume was Arabic, all while literally flipping every table he saw. I quickly walked to the nearest shortcut possible. Story 20. It wasn't exactly a meltdown, but I was looking at sheets once in IKEA. A young couple was checking them out as well, and the guy motions towards the black sheets and says, "Honey, what about those ones?" She replies at normal conversational volume, "Not those ones. Sperm stains will really stand out," and everyone around does a double take and develops very bad coughs. I've never seen somebody become so in public before. Story 21. Went to IKEA shortly after my first wedding to buy a dining room table. It was me, my then husband, and a close friend who, unbeknownst to young me, was my then husband's mistress. I watched them walk around like a couple discussing the options before finally settling on a glass top table that I mentioned many times was impractical. One pan slip away from shattering. While I had my blinders onto all the other signs that they were around, it was this moment which made me realize what was going on. I busted him a few days later, and should have also busted that stupid table. Story 22. I once went through the couch section and overheard a couple arguing about what color couch they should choose. Being the idiotic adult that I am, I pointed at a pink couch, saying, "Hey, that pink couch looks great." The couple proceeds to look at me and said "for off," and walked past the section while arguing. Never had I ever stood in daze for so long. Story 23. This thread made me realize why my marriage works. While we might argue a lot, we go to IKEA about 4 times a year, but I've never set foot in the showroom. We shop online and measure to confirm. The kids go to grandma's, while I get dropped off at the warehouse to skate around on the cart, get what we decided on, and eventually bring it out to the car while she's waiting in the parking lot. Just stick to the warehouse. It's very peaceful seeing all those nice gray rectangles of endless possibility, knowing you'll be leaving happily with only 3 of them for the price you already budgeted for. Story 24. Obligatory, not an employee, but IKEA broke up a couple my parents knew. I believe it was around the time IKEA first came to the US. My parents went to one with their friend and her boyfriend. The boyfriend did not realize what he was in for, and my parents basically watched all the life drain out of him as his girlfriend dragged him through furniture. There may as well have been giant flashing signs saying commitment everywhere. This dude was not ready for it. They were bickering hard by the end and broke up shortly afterwards. Story 25. Super late to thread and not an employee, and also this wasn't my own family, but I think it counts. I went to IKEA last year with 2 friends of mine, a husband and wife who own a pickup truck and could haul stuff. I needed exactly 2 things, a desk and an office chair, and they were just going to look around. While I shopped, I walked into the store, picked out a desk and a chair, and wrote the numbers down in and out of the office section in 90 seconds. Too late, their attention had already been grabbed, and they spent the next 20 minutes discussing potential couches, chairs, dressers, beds, and all of which culminated in my friend saying the single worst thing he could have said in the moment. "This will be such a pain to move. We're moving." "Why are we moving?" "You know, I've always wanted to move to Colorado." "Then why did I just leave the job I loved for the more permanent job here?" Holy, the floodgates were opened. What followed was no less than a 15-minute screaming argument into the midst of IKEA, which continued through the warehouse, through the checkout line, and into the parking lot. The argument started over him wanting to move and her wanting to stay, but quickly progressed to jobs, school, families, children, and ended when she snatched the keys from his hand, screamed a torrent of obscenities at both of us, and drove off. If you've never had to call someone to come pick you up with a couple of boxes because your friend just got divorced in the middle of an IKEA parking lot and your ride drove off, I can't recommend it. Desk still holds up though. Story 26. Obligatory, not an IKEA employee, was at an IKEA one day getting a dresser, was walking through the small item section between the showrooms and the warehouse for stuff like plates and such, saw this guy looking in this bin for shower curtain rods, or maybe just regular curtain rods. Can't remember. The bin was empty, but there was a nearby shopping cart with one in it. It was clearly someone's shopping cart that they had left sitting while they went to get something else. The guy took the curtain rod from the cart and was leaving when the guy came back and caught him. The guy refused to give the curtain rod back to the original person, and a physical altercation ensued. Yes, 2 grown men fought over a cheap IKEA curtain rod until security to buy employees came and broke it up. Story 27. IKEA employee here was organizing some products as I noticed just an elderly couple, approximately 60s, walking past me. The man stops and comments on a rug, saying it's nice. The wife replies that won't fit in our home. The guy immediately growls back, "Oh, come on, we both know what this is about. You think I'm stupid? I'll show you stupid." He then grabs the rug and angrily stomps off. The lady just kept walking as if nothing had happened. Story 28. Went to an IKEA as a kid with a friend in his family. He had a little brother who, upon eating one of those heavenly meatballs, said it tasted bitter. Mother proceeded to eat one and said it tasted fine. Kid disagreed and threw the meatballs one at a time all across the cafeteria before father was able to stop him. Story 29. I've been working at IKEA for the past 2 years. It made me lose hope for humanity. I have so many things. I've had someone try to return an entire used kitchen that was for his mom's house, and the mother passed away. Guy was screaming at my manager. Had a couple get into an argument about the size of the furniture and whether it fit into their car. By the end it escalated to who has the louder voice. It's endless lel. Just don't remember any off the top of my head. Story 30. My favorite has got to be the family of 5, ranging from maybe 1550, incredibly vocal Middle Eastern family that had almost zero English skills between them. I had the unfortunate task of informing them through a translator that the bunk bed they had ordered was in stock but was in the air in the self-serve area and not currently available, so they could come and pick it up after close. Well, that wasn't good enough for them, and all 5 of them threw themselves onto the ground and just flat out began wailing. To keep this in perspective, they had ordered this bed at $255. The store closes at $2,100. They had to wait an extra 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, to get their product. When they see that wailing doesn't seem to be working for them, they begin to take items of other people's trolleys and taking them outside to their car, all while yelling at the top of their lungs. At this point, security are with them trying to calm them down. 10 minutes into this, the bunk bed has been brought down and is ready to hand out. Even after being informed that their order is ready, this family carries on for another 30 minutes and security was forced to call the police. 10 minutes later, the police walked through the door and the family immediately stopped everything they were doing and just simply walked out of the store and left. It was an interesting sight for us and a pretty terrible experience for all the other customers there at the time. Story 31. Was about 12 years old at the time, a glorious bygone era. It was frosted tips, holographic pencil cases, and punked was all the rage. So one day at IKEA, my dad's looking at armor, going down a line of them, appraising each one individually. So I hatched the genius scheme to hide in one of his upcoming armor and scare the living beebus out of my old man, waiting patiently ease within my Swedish pod. The illuminated crack of light slipping through the aperture between the doors darkens. That means it's showtime. I brace myself for maximum spook. The door quickly swings open. I let out a loud boo, which is promptly silenced by the sight of a little hijab woman, confused, hurt, rightfully so, out of her wits. 2 male companions arrive and begin berating me, I think in Arabic. While I stand frozen in shock with father nowhere in sight, I make a hasty escape in the middle of this stern talking to eventually coming across my family elsewhere and remaining very, very quiet for the rest of that day. Story 32. IKEA must be where you go to see how strong your relationship is. My now ex-wife at the time and I were already having regular fights. I'll admit I'm really a typical guy, in that I have a limit for browsing in a store. I'm not interested in ad crowds, and it's doubly miserable. However, I'm usually able to put on a good face and just grit my teeth through it. But that trip to the IKEA store, I swear we were that couple with the woman walking 10 feet ahead of the man, and we didn't speak the whole 2-hour trip home. Story 33. Sadly, I've had my own IKEA family meltdown. When I was 19, my then boyfriend of 3 months, who I'd already had a terrible relationship with, moved to Europe for college. Being that I was 19 and dumb, I thought it was a good idea to meet him there. He would be living with his aunt, and so his mother gave him a budget for some IKEA furniture for his bedroom. We'd gotten only as far as the chairs. He'd picked out a computer chair, a reading chair, and a couch before he'd exceeded his budget. I pointed out this was unfair to his mother, and meltdown number 1 occurred as he justified the need for all these places to sit. It was scary, so I cried. People stared. It was awkward. When we'd finally made it to the cafe, I couldn't read the menu because it was in the native language. I asked him a few times, "Hey, is the chicken?" and he just wouldn't respond to me. I just figured I'd eat later. But when it came time to order and I didn't know what I wanted, he absolutely blew a gasket. This somehow turned into an argument about how I needed to eat better so I could be strong enough to carry his children. Buddy, this caused me to cry even more in utter confusion and fear. I was unsafe in a foreign country with a monster. We sat at the table together as he loudly berated and shoveled food into his mouth, and I just bawled. Eventually, some people approached us and asked if everything was okay, but I couldn't understand or speak to them easily. One of the most embarrassing public moments of my life. On the bright side, I made it home 3 months later, and he now works in sewage back in the US. Story 34. Our worst IKEA find, I didn't even go my husband, went with a list including the most important thing, which was a chest of drawers. He got to the warehouse, and there weren't any left on the shelf, so he looked round nearby shelves for chests of drawers, and chose one which was a similar weight, because choosing furniture by weight is the best way. Story 35. Not nearly as bad as some others. Went with my ex-wife. While we were still married, she picked out an entire bedroom suite for us. We spent 6 hours walking that store, went to pick up all of the parts, and the side rails of the bed were on back order for 2 weeks. I said, no worries, we've already collected everything else. Let's just sleep on the floor until the rails come in. Nope. She said, put it all back. Fine, I'll put it all back. But I'm never coming to this store with you literally ever again, and I never did. Story 36. Not an IKEA employee, but I will share my personal story. My wife and I married extremely fast and young. I was in the military station in California, and she had just driven across the country with her mom the day after she moved in. We did the first IKEA trip. We were still getting a feel for each other, some disagreements about some of the furniture, but nothing huge. But then we got to the beds. I sat on a really low bed and looked at her and my mother-in-law, who was there with us, and said something like, low beds are pretty neat. My wife had a little mental breakdown, lays down in one of the pre-configured rooms and starts crying. I sit next to her and try to figure out what's going on. She was just really overwhelmed with the whole situation. Just married to a guy she only met a few months before, broke after moving across the country to a state she had only visited, and having to furnish an empty apartment. It was just a lot going on, and the bed remark was the catalyst, so we talk it out. I tell her that the bed was just a remark, and I didn't care which bed we got as long as she was happy with it. So we kiss and make up. We pick a bed, and we're happy. On the way out to next fake bedroom, we see a couple go in full berserk mode at each other, and we just walked by like, hey, at least that's not as high five. The best part was when she was laying down in the IKEA room. People were reaching over and trying to see the prices of the nightstand. My wife was crying next to people at IKEA can get ruthless about the ambient bar. Story 37. Not a meltdown or an employee, but I was in an IKEA when a random lady grabbed my hand, pulled me over to the bookshelf section, and told me all about the number of books she hoped to fit on one color scheme of her bedroom bed. It was pretty weird, but I gave her my best advice on bookshelves and made it back to my boyfriend, who was about 20 feet away, looking at me with, should I come save you eyes? IKEA is a weird place, man. Story 38. I am not an employee, but as a customer, I had a pretty intense experience. My wife and I had gone through the showrooms and were just about to enter the area where you pick up your boxed furniture kits. There weren't any of the flat sleds, so everyone was waiting around for more to be loaded. I was there for a good 20 minutes, and I was second in line. Right around the 20-minute mark, one sled comes down the conveyor and a guy from the back of the line walks up and says to the guy ahead of me, I guess you're getting the next one. Of course, the guy in front of me was like, hey man, I've been waiting, and this card is mine. The other guy then proceeded to pull a knife, grab the guy in front of me by the collar, and hold the blade to his neck, while saying, I'm pretty sure you're getting the next one. So yeah, I almost saw a guy get stabbed over a fight for a shopping cart in IKEA. Story 39. I was working as the greeter one day as family of 3 walked in. As they're walking through the door, the family, what I assumed was mother, father, and daughter, was mid-conversation. I hear the daughter say, what are they going to do, kick me out? So now, I'm instantly curious. I give her a quick check and realize she has a chihuahua in her purse. I stroll up to them and say, welcome to IKEA, but I'm sorry the dog cannot come inside. Then we go through the whole why not because we serve food scenario. The daughter then starts losing her. It's 90 degrees outside, and I don't have water, so I tell her she can wait outside, while someone goes into the marketplace and buys a dog bowl and water, and brings it out to her. She literally starts screaming, not yelling. I think yelling requires words. This is just a scream. This lady is in her 20s easily. It is at this point the father loses his and just starts yelling at her. I told you to leave the dog home. I don't know why you have to bring it everywhere you go. We'll be fine alone at the house for a couple of hours. Now I have to deal with this. So the dog went outside and the father went to the marketplace, while I sat uncomfortably with the mother in the entrance for a good half hour until her husband came back. Story 40. Dude didn't have a receipt to return a used tubing, and for told no, he threw a fit. Security came, and he wouldn't move. Cops came, and he finally did. Bud came right back in and laid on the floor, screaming, refusing to leave without his money. Bigger cop comes in, not taking any of this, guys, and handcuffs him. His screaming intensifies to a loud shriek, and he's finally escorted out. This whole ordeal lasts about half hour. I've got tons of these. IKEA customers are. Story 41. Not an employee, but was walking through my local IKEA with my girlfriend and saw a young boy about 5 having a meltdown. Not uncommon at all. But then the kid's father lost it, grabbed the kid by shoulders and started shaking him while screaming at him to shut the up, or you're going back to the car. This understandably made the kid scream even louder. So the guy was back and snacks the kid hard across the face. At this point, I intervened, telling him what he was doing was completely unacceptable. He tells me to mind my own business. I pull out my wallet and show him a business card. I work for child protection as an investor, and tell him it actually is my business. He then tells me to off, grabs the still crying kid and hustles away to his wife, who was a short distance away. I see him angry gesturing to his wife, then point at me, after which his wife proceeds to flip me off. Not wanting to escalate things further, I pull out my phone and call into our crisis office, letting them know what I saw. By this time, several bystanders had approached and let me know they saw everything, and how the guy was obviously, and one person have also alerted a staff member. On my way out of the store, there was Buddy and his wife talking to the police and a few of my coworkers. Story 42. My sister, not self-aware at all, she yells and screams at her boyfriend while he ignores her and does his own thing in the store. All of this because she demands that he stay right by her to look at every little thing. She points out 5 minutes later, when she's done having a one-sided fight with him, she's basically dry humping him in public to compensate for the behavior. He also ignores this, and that's when it starts over again. I can't go to IKEA with them anymore. It's too embarrassing. She will scream my name through the IKEA restaurant because she's too lazy to take a step aside so that she can see everyone in the restaurant and find me. She doesn't care if this bothers the other customers. Story 43. Just last night, a literal minute before closing, I had a woman come upstairs looking for a nightstand after wandering away from me, guiding her. It took her children, and I shouting at her to try and get her attention back before she made her way to nightstands. I start showing her options, and her 10 to 12-year-old children start dive bombing every single freshly made bed. I ask them to stop with varying degrees of politeness, and when that doesn't work, ask her to please stop them. Instead, she just offers an apology and gets back to nightstands. So she's looking for the biggest possible one, and that's the Hornsindo $129 monstrosity that looks like something you drag out of a baby boomer's house after their untimely demise. She's giving me a lot of haggard sighs, look around desperately, and criticizing the features of the nightstand at hand. I've given up the idea of containing her kids, so I have to take the full brunt of her passive-aggressive disappointment. She keeps giving me this face like I'm supposed to pull back a book on the Billy, revealing a secret department of all the good furniture. You know, she offers I'd buy this in a heartbeat if it came engraved. What am I supposed to do with that? Pat her on her widow head and teeter. I make it goo you instead. I just her that was a real shame. After a few more questions, including the size of a normal nightstand, she gives up and agrees to leave. While walking her and Helen's out, she asks where's a fun place to stay. Upon asking for clarification, she makes it clear that it's spring break for her kids. They're from the next state over, and she hasn't found a place for them to stay by 900 PM because every nice hotel is charging too much because everyone else is on spring break too now. She's refusing to get on the elevator going down until I make a decent recommendation, so I'm furiously Googling hotels so this mad woman will leave. Eventually, we find a place nearby with a water slide, and that was enough for her to leave, but I was 113% done with everyone in the family. Story 44. Not a family, but relevant. I think I work in the bistro area, and I once had a customer scream and threaten a coworker when he was told he couldn't get a cup for water. We only have one cup in the bistro. It cost $1 and is counted as inventory, so we can't give them out for free. When my coworker told the guy this, he flipped out, said IKEA is pure, and we are operating illegally by not providing him water. We aren't. There's a water fountain to the right. He begins to call my coworker a piece of approaches me and asks for a cup. I tell him the same thing, which only angers him further. Once I point out the water fountain nearby, he says he won't use it because he isn't a peasant, and says he'll come back to deal with me and my coworker for trying to profit off his dehydration. Needless to say, I never saw him again, and my coworker and I shared a good laugh. Story 45. Oh man, not a family meltdown, but here's the story of the craziest woman I've ever had to deal with. We have an ACES section which is full scratch and dent or discontinued items we sell at a discount. This lady C walks up to my cash lane with 2 plants, and before I'd even get to scan them, she says, "Those are both $4, thinking, that's a bit suspicious. I pick them both up. One is clearly marked as an ALS item. The other has the standard barcode. I tried to explain to her that only one of them is $4. The other will be full price. Her face immediately turned red, and she demands I call back to ACES. I call down there. They come up and confirm that it's not their product. So she wants a manager. Call a manager M, and as soon as M gets there, this woman starts berating her. CSC key, your cashier won't give me the right price for this plant. I'm running out of patience, and I don't have time for her to learn to do her job right. I knew how to do my job, she just clearly never been told no before. I'm sorry mom, rules are rules. And I can't give you a special discount, is there anything else I can see's face turned almost purple. And I legitimately thought she was going to explode. I don't care what you have to say, you're about to lose so much business. I shop here all the time, this place will close down. Without my money, teach your little cashier to do her job right. Or I'm never coming back, she's doing her job right. You need to leave before I call security. Or close your lane down, take a break. If you need to, we won't be helping this lady anymore. You can't do that. She could. And she did. I'm just glad I had a manager who didn't take at the time. But this woman had a total meltdown, told her crazy lady, wanted a cheaper plant, didn't get her way, turned purple. Story 46. I work in customer service in a UK store. We get so many meltdowns, it's really hard to choose. I've had so many things thrown at me. I've lost count. My best one might be the gentleman who demanded to speak to Ingvar Kamprad about his waiting time at the collection point. When I stupidly offered the department manager, he said he'd settle for someone Swedish. Unfortunately, we couldn't help him. He took his things and left screaming that he'd write to Sweden. I've not heard anything back yet. Story 47. As my wife and I were finishing up and walking to the registers, the couple in front of us was somewhat quietly arguing about something in their cart. Finally, it came to a head when the female in front of us said something along the lines of, I just don't understand why we aren't getting the lamp. And at that point her partner lost it. He turned to her and quite laughed loudly, yelled, I will snap your neck. They didn't get the lamp. They did, however, give my wife and I a line to say to each other, injustice every time we're at IKEA. Story 48. When my daughter was quite young and my son had just been born, I took her to IKEA to pick out some items for her new little brother. We had fun sitting and playing in the various miniature rooms, and I remember that you could drop your child off at Smoland for an hour to shop. I checked her in, and she barely met the minimums, but I don't recall the rules anymore, and went to get the items we needed. Then they came over the speakers and gave the numbers from her check and slip. Having newborn baby sleep loss and being out on my own with baby Doug, one for the first time, I panicked and went for the nearest shortcut. Then I took the next shortcut and the next and ended up back in the same section. Nanny, I had full-on deer in headlights mode, envisioning some grievous head injury she sustained and could not figure out how to get out of there. Finally, I saw an employee at one of their consultation desks and asked them to please lead me to Sman so I could get her. He lead me over there, telling me that she was no doubt all right and just needed help with a diaper change. Sure enough, she did need to change her diaper, and the crisis was averted. But for that 10 minutes of confusion, I was the dumb panicking dad. Story 49. 8 years from selling kitchens at IKEA, I've seen and heard a lot that the worst meltdown that comes to mind is about a couple who were there getting a new kitchen for their burned-down house. They were both feeling a bit off, a bit strange. While being polite and communicating properly, they seemed drifted a bit further down our dialogue. When I asked about what method of delivery they preferred, I found out their garage and car was burned down too. In fact, everything they owned was burned down. I asked how that happened, and the guy answered in a strange but loving tone, I married this wonderful woman, she was a foreigner. And it turned out her own family father had done it. Their body language and the tone of their voices said 1,000 times more about the situation they were in, about the fighting they had done to be together, that I am able to express here. It was both sad and beautiful. I adore that couple, still hope and wish them the best future. Story 50. I used to work as a cashier for an IKEA's food department used store. When I was in college, I primarily worked in the bistro near the exit, where you can buy the hot dogs. We had this policy that we cannot give out free cups, no matter what, in the bistro. So if a customer asked us for a water cup, we had to tell them we don't have those and offer to sell them a soda cup $1. I didn't expect how incredibly furious people would get over this. I've had people call me all sorts of names just because they can't get a free cup of soda fountain water. One lady told me to look her child in the eyes and tell him he's not allowed to get water here because we are greedy monsters. I would sympathize with the customers if there wasn't any source of free water in the store. But IKEA has several free water fountains all over the store. There is one even by the bistro. I tell every customer this, but nope, water fountains aren't good enough. Irrational customers start at 68. And as someone who has cleaned soda fountain machines several times, I can promise you that anything that comes out of a water fountain will be cleaner than anything that comes out of soda fountain. Those machines get ridiculously filthy really quickly. Seriously, I haven't drank from a soda fountain since the first time I opened one up. IKEA was really good to me as an employer, but working in the bistro. Story 51. Not an employee, but a family member of said family meltdown. Basically, my mom was obsessed on buying me and my brother's new beds, one of my brothers and I declined, so instead, we decided on getting my youngest brother a new bed. He has autism, and he's unable to make his own decisions. Anyways, at IKEA, my mom wanted to go all in and buy this one bed with storage IDR, the name. But it looks similar to this. On top of that, she wanted the headboard that comes with it, which came with so many pieces. Mind you, throughout our time at IKEA, she kept telling my brother and I to get new beds and kept asking, "Are you sure?" After we kept declining, by the time we got near the checkout line, she saw a bed frame and yet again asked us if we would want that one. By then, my brother lashed out on her and told her to off. My mom then said, "I'm about to cry," and seeing her get teary-eyed, I had to defuse the situation and tell my brother to chill out. He apologized after we unloaded everything to our SUV, but then got angry and frustrated again. Once we had to put all of these pieces of wood together to make a thick-ass bed frame, 4 large drawers and a headboard with 6 small shelves attached to it that needed to be attached onto the wall. My youngest brother was happy and excited once the bed was completed, and he still sleeps on it to this day. Story 52. I hope someone was following us yesterday, because I went to IKEA in Westchester with my husband and mother-in-law. This was not my idea. We were looking for a reading chair for me. Mill kept suggesting very industrial-looking designs with either very low arms or no arms at all. I was trying to explain that her suggest questions did not make for comfortable reading. My Mill's response was, "You read too much, you should read less." I was speechless for about 2 minutes. Then I basically turned into Gollum, and his whispered, "What the hell is wrong with you?" She proudly answered, "A person who doesn't read." Story 53. In Beijing, it's a magnet for all over 55 retired and single. They sit in the cafeteria all day sipping on a coffee or nothing. No tables for anyone to sit down. Finally, management set up a 1-hour rule. This rule lasted 2 days. The locals brought in all their friends and relatives to sit in all the chairs. Then they proceeded to chant and yell their rights were being violated. You can't call 911 in China. 110. The police come look around and tell you, yes, you have a problem, goodbye. Story 54. I'm a cashier. I've never seen a family meltdown, but one time I was helping at the self-serve station and I watched a gentleman let his 5-year-old son run around loose in the self-serve area. Another customer was trying to scan a big curtain rod, so we had to take it out of his cart to tilt it and get to the barcode. Well, the kid just happened to have run over to that area and got hit in the face with the curtain rod. When it was pulled out, the dad got so angry with the guy who just kept apologizing, and I was over here like, "Brew, keep an eye on your kid if you don't want them to get hurt." Also, I make a lot of little kids cry when I have to take back the stuffed animal chucking toy their parents let them carry around the entire store and never intended to buy, but I guess it's easier for parents to blame the mean cashier lady for taking it away than doing it themselves. Story 55. One time, a lady came up to me freaking out that IKEA had discontinued her favorite cookie. I had to call the manager, and she just yelled at him that her therapy dog had just died, and she needed that cookie. At another time, a Russian family was asking for queen-size sheets, but with the accent it sounded like Gavain. I just stood there dumbfounded as they repeated Gavain over and over. Story 56. My mom had one. We'd gone to IKEA hunting for kitchens and decided to get breakfast first. We queued for ages for breakfast before someone informed us that we were in the wrong line and had to switch. Just after we moved, they closed the breakfast line and refused to serve us. My mom just sort of lost it. She complained to the manager about the attitude of the staff and the lack of line signage, and then started crying. She must have looked crazy. What no one would have known is that we've been looking at kitchens to distract ourselves from the death of my grandmother. Earlier that week, every little thing was setting my mom off because it was all still so raw. The manager was quite sympathetic when my mom cried, even though she had no idea my mom was so upset, and I was always really grateful for that. Story 57. Not an IKEA employee, but I was at the IKEA in Wembley in London, and basically ended up wandering through the shop behind a mother and daughter. The mother was probably about 80, and the daughter about 50. They were bickering with each other the entire time, and in the worst possible place, the section with the stacks of wine glasses in the aisle. The mother said something and walked off, and the daughter grabbed her by the hair and dragged her backwards. They both fell into the big display of wine glasses and smashed the out of it. Didn't seem like they got cut up, but I moved out of there quickly as they were still fighting, so didn't see the end result. Story 58. I worked at IKEA for 2 years in SMAN, which is the free childcare IKEA provides for shoppers. The worst part of the job was turning away families because their children were not potty trained or met the height requirements. Some families were understanding, most were not. I'll never forget one family was making a huge screaming fuss because I was not allowing their 2-year-old to enter because she was under the height requirement. The father pressed his daughter against the wall, so roughly using his hand below her neck to push her head up, practically choking her. Trying to change my mind, I had to walk away because at that point, the child was crying from being so uncomfortable. Smand was one of the most terrible retail jobs I've ever had. Parents can be ruthless. Tori 59. Okay, in my last week of working here part-time since 2013, and this being my last week, this will be my time to shine. Writing this from the PAX department. One time a colleague was approached by a customer to check on a kid behind a curtain. Mind you, my colleague, one was an old, very shy and introvert man. As soon as he went to look behind the curtain, he finds a 13 years. Whacking his little off. The colleague, one shocked as he went to get help, cause he lost it. In the meantime, the kid ran up to the other colleague and a female, claiming that he didn't do anything. Well, we didn't have any checklist for dealing with this sort of situations. And long story short, in the end, the parents of the kid were approached and have been kindly asked to take their horny 13 years old and leave the building. Story 60. I worked in a few departments, but the worst family meltdowns were seen in Smand. Jesus, people sure are entitled when it comes to their sketchy free babysitting. I was yelled at pretty much daily for not allowing unpotty trained kids, sockless kids, and too young or too old children. And I had a lady tell me I was because I made her check her child in on the check-in side. Do you really want to belittle the stranger you are leaving your child with? We had to be very strict about the check and check outside because the week before the whole department lost a kid and got fired. Also had a lady leave the store and not come back for 4 hours. She was outraged. We called the police. Sorry, that's literally child abandonment. Story 61. I bought a rug there along with some matching tea towels and oven gloves. Then boyfriend threw a fit at me because they matched, and apparently this was all wrong. I don't exactly know what his logic was, but it was apparently wrong enough for him to drive off with all the offending items and leave me in Milton Keynes IKEA. I figured he'd calm down, so I went to get some meatballs and lingonberry cola. And he did indeed come back. About 20 minutes later, the rug and the tea towels and the oven gloves grew on him enough that when I moved out some years later, he sulked because I took them with me.